topic because it's one I see all the time. So it's one that's near and dear to my heart: care, connection, and communication. So in a private counseling practice, caring, connecting, and communicating are so important to where we are in terms of our emotional health. And I want to start with, and let me make another technical, are you getting the slides as I've changed them? On to the next slide that's titled Care and Connection.
Yes.
You've got, okay, so I can advance my slides as needed, and that's working okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's carry on then. Care and connection. When I'm talking about, I put these two together because care, we often have a definition that comes to mind. Care, we think of ourselves as either receiving care or giving care. The common definition is there's a person with a condition and there's a direct caregiver attached to it. Very important. But I'm going to ask everyone today to think a little bit differently when I use the word care, and I want to start with self-care. Self-care is not as natural to us as caring for someone who needs care. However, both care receiver and caregiver benefit from a good self-care assessment. So what we find in terms of connections is good for you and all of your connections to have a self-care plan. And that's what I want to start with. Self-care is something that needs to be a unique, thoughtful journey. One of the things that has gone on right now with COVID is that we have all this me time. It was unexpected, but my suggestion is use your me time thoughtfully. And by that, I mean solitude has benefits. And when I say solitude, I don't mean isolation and I don't mean loneliness. I mean solitude. During solitude, we find that the brain gets an opportunity to reboot. And when you think of how our brain works, our brain is a very complex tool and it goes in many directions and it's designed to do that. So taking it and slowing it down and focusing it really gives it an important rest period that we don't often give ourselves, especially nowadays with all the data going at our brain. What studies have told us this does is that it improves our concentration, allows us to focus on one thing, improves our problem solving, and can help us to prioritize. Prioritizing is really important. We forget that because our brain is so very capable of saying what if, many different directions, we can easily get caught up in what I call the static of everyday life and not look at the things that really have a lot of meaning. So my first suggestion when you're looking at self-care journey is to go to an environmental assessment. And what am I talking about here? What I'm talking about is looking around where you are physically. So what is your physical space like? With COVID, we've had lots and lots of changes. Do think about changes. Have things changed for you recently? One of the things that's changed for me and many others is we've suddenly, my home office that I spent some time in and enjoyed has become my only office. And that has changed things. Who do you live with? Have you had changes in your housemates? Again, COVID has brought forth a lot of changes. In my personal life, my daughter, who's 22 and finishing up her accounting degree, 2 weeks before going back to school, was told you can do this virtually, and she decided that was the safest thing to do. So we had an extra person in our care circle. So do look at the now when you're doing an environmental assessment. This helps you make decisions about what practices will help you be strong emotionally and physically and spiritually. We want to look at the full spectrum. So, how are your housemates? Is this a good thing? Is it a difficult thing? What's going on with who you live with? When do you start your day? And to a lot of my clients, I'll work with folks at a time of change. And so one of the things I'll tell people, everyone wants to retire, right? We look forward to it. Sometimes it's difficult to adjust to it. So I'll say, when do you most enjoy starting your day? Because you have a choice now when you become retired. It's different. COVID has changed a lot of things, so things may be different now. But look at when you feel your best. And so if you feel your best starting your day a little later or a little earlier, that's an option you have. And really, that's a form of self care. And when you make a decision like that, you can share it with people. Hey, I really find out, I really like getting up around 8:39 instead of being in my office at 8:30 or 9. So what's different now? So this again is part of the environmental assessment you'll do in order to determine what practices help you feel your best. So what do you do most days? And I tell people, don't think 1 or 2 days. Think about like in the past 2 weeks. And what we'll often do is say, well, gosh, I feel like time goes and I don't know, I didn't get anything done. And then we'll go back and we'll look at that day and they'll say, oh, wow, yeah, I did do a lot. So think about where your time is spent. Who comes to you? Where do you go? Um, One of my clients retired, was having trouble with the adjustment. One of the things he voiced was that he felt like once he retired, he started to have some health issues, unfortunately. But he said, I feel like my new job is going to the doctor. Not a retirement planned on. So, what do you do about that pattern that you do have control over to feel better about? So, do look at who comes to you. Has your housekeeping service not been able to come because of COVID? And that makes a burden. It's just awareness of that environmental change and look at the now. And finally, under environmental is what is a highlight of most of your days? We don't think about our days as having highlights. We get through the days, we're taken by tasks. So small things really do matter. And my daughter, again, I mentioned her, she's 22. Her highlight, she begins her day this way, is that very first cup of coffee she has. She really gets excited about that. She jokes about not being able to process anything until she has it. So the highlight of your day might be really meaningful is every Friday you talk to your grandson, every Friday afternoon he's away at university. But give your day a highlight. And as someone who does this for a living, I've kind of trained myself to look positively, and I use the recent weather we've had as an example. In the beginning of the wet, cold, rainy weather, I was like, great, we have soup weather. I made clam chowder the first wet, cold day. The first day we had sunshine, I celebrated that. So think of what your highlight is, and remember, insignificant things really do mean something when you're going through and looking at creating some new emotional habits and some new self-care practices. Purpose and life test. One of the things we didn't mention, DAPS is very kindly making available some of the handouts I'm going to refer to, and this is the first one, to give you more information if you'd like more information after this talk. The Purpose and Life Test is a 20-question test that rates each question from 1 to 5. 1 is usually the low point, 5 is the more positive response. I suggest that this is a really good way to look where you are from an inner emotional point of view. Some of the questions, just to give you an idea of what it's like, is the first one is, I am usually bored, which would be your 1, or enthusiastic. I greet every day with enthusiasm. There's your 5. A lot of us are somewhere in the middle. Another example of the questions you would find on this test is every day is always the same, or it's new and different. And finally, one that I feel is very meaningful to folks who have gotten a chronic diagnosis or dealing with a condition or a disease that is with you, is when that happens, we often feel a loss of control. And you feel like my life, one would be my life is out of my control, or it's fine, it's in my hands. I am in control. There are decisions I make. Regardless if they're tough decisions, you're in control of your life. So this is kind of a neat test to see where you're at now. It asks my suggestion is do answer it honestly. We can all get an A and put fives down, but really looking at where we're at, it will help you look at where you feel about legacy, your connection spiritually, etc., your place in the world. So it works well with the environmental piece I mentioned as you're proposing, what do I do for myself more? What are the good practices that I can add to my life? And final about self-care. When we're looking at self-care, it has to be a unique journey. But I do say, don't forget your senses. Think how we are without our vision, our hearing, our smell, our taste, and our touch. All of these add to the dimensions to our life. So do use your senses along with your environmental asset and your internal review with the purpose in life to decide what self-care practices, what do I control that really makes my life a little more enjoyable? That what do I want to be remembered for? What do I just want to greet the day with? Fresh flowers, you can get yourself flowers. It's a simple way to feed your vision. Don't wait for a special occasion, but it's okay to go ahead and create little rituals. Maybe every Thursday morning when you go to a grocery store, you pick yourself up some flowers as well. Another thing, going back kind of to the physical environmental assessment, is using your senses, feeding your vision. Take a corner of a room in your house and transform it. I had a corner downstairs in my family room. I'm an avid reader and I love reading on my iPad. And so I created a little reading corner. Comfy seating, perfect lighting, plug-ins, everything I needed to relax and read. Well, the good news is I really enjoy this. When I look at it, I feel good. When I use it, I feel good. Bad news is popular with the other two members of my family, my two COVID buddies, my husband and daughter who are here with me. So I have a little bit of competition for my transformed corner. But do look with fresh eyes and you're feeding your vision with that. And I want to talk specifically about music as far as hearing and feeding your hearing, because it's such a wonderful tool for emotional health. What we tend to do is listen to the music that we are accustomed to. And I really want to challenge folks to use music to connect to memories and to get new experiences. It really has such a range, and especially now it's so easy to do. One example, I worked through with a client of mine recently is we thought it'd be fun for them to listen to the music they liked as a teenager. They didn't like being a teenager, and who does? We all like to get through that, right? But listening to that music they loved as a teenager was fun. You're doing it from a different perspective. If you had a favorite relative who liked big band music and you've never listened to it, now might be a fun time to explore it. Holiday music, what I'm doing right now, which is my family, I'm not sure as excited as I am, but I'm enjoying it as I'm playing Halloween music. So when I cook, I like to play music. So I've been playing the Halloween music to have something fun to listen to. Taste and touch are important parts of this sensory self-care. Think of what a house smells like when you walk in and you bake something and you fresh cookies, fresh bread, whatever. Do think about, where do I feed my scent? You might want to start making cookies on Saturday mornings or have pancakes every Saturday. Anyway, you feed your smell can be helpful. Think of if I took a rotten egg and threw it on the floor, how we'd all recoil naturally. Instead, a scented candle with a pumpkin, if we like pumpkin, scent, sends a different message. So again, last part, think carefully. Only you can make a plan for self-care. But if you feel good, you feel in control, you're taking these actions, you're trying new things, using your senses, your inner self, and your environment, you can contribute to good practices. I call them good emotional habits. So how else does this help us? With communication. We're coming from a place of strength once we feel good about ourselves. Communication is so important. It feeds all those connections that mean something to us. The smallest connections to when we have to go in the bank. Now we only go when we have to, and it's for the 3 to 5 minutes we have to, but that's still a human to human connection. To our closest relationships, people like our spouse, our siblings, our kids, people we live with. So all connections are fed by good communication. Communication varies with the context. Simply being aware of the context of your communications can really be helpful. Going back to the bank person, if they seem upset and you realize maybe they're having a bad day, I need to be patient. Just reading that context. One of the common things I have is older adults dealing with adult children. It's still parent child, but it's adult to adult. It really is a different context from when they were 10 and sticking their tongue out at you. So it's different. So just be aware of the context and you will respond to it with better acuity here. So we can improve all our communications. That's one of the things I love about communication work is that we can improve it. It's very easy to fall into patterns. We all do it. So I want to talk about some of the common pitfalls in habits. So this one is also a worksheet that I included called listening blocks. And this is something I want to say, think not, what you're going to think about is others who do this. We all know someone who does some of it, but we do it too. But generally speaking, these are not good practices. So I'm going to go through them and give you some suggestions on how to avoid them, how to do it better, so to speak. Mind reading. We all know someone who knows exactly what we are thinking, correct? No, this is knowing but not asking. I had a client who said, oh, I know what my husband thinks about such and such. And so I said, did you ask? And no, but I don't need to. And I said, well, humor me, try it. Different result than what you expected. Sometimes you'll be surprised, but I say give every relationship you're involved in the respect of the ask. Even if you feel 99.9% you know, ask. It's such an easy pattern to start to work on or habit. So let me make sure I understand how you feel about this. Let me ask you. It's an easy way to do it. It will get you much further than I know or avoiding a subject you really want to talk about because you know how they're going to respond. Rehearsing, planning your response. Again, this is another one we all do. Planning our response is something our brain is very capable of. Someone tells you a funny story about their dog. You think your dog did something that was twice as funny, and you are thinking about this twice as funny dog story, and you're planning your response. When you catch your brain doing that, just stop it and stay in the moment. Stay with the person you're talking to and don't pull up the curtain on the plan. So when you catch yourself planning your response, don't do it. Just move forward. Remember, just listen. And that's what most people want. Lean in and listen. Judging. Judging is evaluating, but not understanding. And again, this is an area that our brain likes to take us to because when we're judging, it's natural. Our brain can go, well, we know A, B, and C. Because we know A, B, and C, that means this. But we don't want to be evaluated most of the time, right? Think about it. When we're talking with someone, do we want an evaluation or do we want understanding? We want understanding. So This is something we can control with our habits. And so if you catch yourself starting to judge, pull back and say, I just want to understand. Use the word understand if you can, it will help. Advising. Caregivers, I know you hear this one loud and clear. Anyone who's been a caregiver like myself or received care like myself, we get solutions from well-meaning people all the time. We're glad they do, but solutions versus understanding. I'll take understanding any day. So when this happens, again, just repeat what you need. Someone might give you solutions. One of the simple ways I have had, and having been a caregiver, is when someone has said, oh, well, if you go to maybe if you take so-and-so to such and such a doctor or do this. And I've said, well, that's a great idea. Would you like to do that? Crickets. Sometimes asking an advisor to take action can get them to stop for a moment and think about it. It gives you a little bit of space to move on to saying understanding. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I appreciate you advising me, but I'd really like to just talk. That helps me a lot to have someone who understands what I'm going through. Final two, placating, agreeing, but not really listening. We've all been there too. Yeah, whatever. Pointless communication doesn't feel good. We've done it, others have done it to us. When it happens, the solution is to call it out. Just say, look, I don't think you really heard me. That's okay, but this is important. I want to get back to this later. So don't let it be a way to stop a communication on something that's meaningful to you. Finally, and we've all been here too, and we all know people who go here way too often, is being right. Ignoring any possibility that you should change. I call it falling into the being right trench. It's like the person is just, that's it. They're in this rigid little pathway and they're having trouble thinking there's any possible way to think about this. So again, that's another one, gently letting someone know that you are entitled to your thoughts and they're entitled to theirs, but there's going to usually be a change when you put those two together. No one is always right. And then being respectful in a relationship is acknowledging that. What are some other solutions for communication? Number one, define the concerns. People will sometimes say, and this goes back to mind reading, well, you know what I'm upset about. No, they don't. You know that's important to me. No, they don't. So one of the tools that I use in talking about communication in family settings, and this is created by a friend of mine, a fellow therapist, Barry Wallace, who I want to give credit to, is called the House Rules for Family, Household, and Financial. And basically what this does is, as you have the conversation, I'm seeing that now with COVID, things have changed. If your 30-year-old son moved back in with you because he lost his job, it might be a good time to talk about who does what household financial tasks. What are the rules for the family? What do we do just respectfully? If somebody stays out to a certain hour, should they let somebody know that they're out late? What do you need to do to live together and get the everyday work of living done in a harmonious and loving way? So it's never a bad idea to examine this and take a look. These worksheets that my friend designed have been very helpful for that, and I've used them a lot with that purpose. Another communication solution is to express yourself with I statements. And when I say I statements, I mean that quite literally, meaning I feel really overwhelmed when I come home and go down to the kitchen and find all the dishes are still here. So you're saying how you feel and what the concern is. And a simple statement to get into the habit, what I'm really kind of proposing here is some good emotional habits, is saying, I need you to listen to me, is a good way to start an I statement. One temptation here is to go ahead and start an I statement and then add a you. Like, I really need you to not be so messy so I don't get so upset. Forget the you piece. Stick with the I, and because otherwise the person's defenses go up. You want to express how you feel, and that's what the I is for. And that's what you get 100% a chance to do. Finally, on communication solutions, we have many, many tools. Do use the many tools we have. So bear that in mind. Another thing I always like to mention when it comes to communication is check in with your important people, but think of them as a unit. We don't think of our spouse or our housemate or whoever we live with as part of the unit unless we make a conscious effort. So instead of how are you doing, say, how are we doing? Are we okay? Or I notice you seem kind of low energy. Is that accurate? Or I notice there's a spring in your step. Is that accurate? Check in with the unit. It's a simple practice that can enhance communication because you are in it together, whoever you're communicating with. Consider all tools. And when I say consider all tools, I'm asking for people to think creatively. Now, we have so many sources of information. I know a lot of our brains are feeling a bit bombarded. We have movies and shows that were getting us through COVID. We're streaming with Netflix and Hulu. We're recording our favorite shows. We have lots of content. We have lots of social media that we can engage in for connections. So do think about these tools. The one thing I will tell you that all therapists who are advising people is while we have a lot of great tools to use them in a thoughtful way that protects yourself. Overdoing it right now, we're really recommending almost universally people go ahead and ration what they're doing with TV news. There's so much sad, upsetting, challenging emotional stuff going on there. It's not going to help you to keep repeating that. And that's what the news does. So instead, some ideas on ways to stay connected with all your tools. Movies and shows, don't watch them by yourself, share in some way. And I'll give a personal example. I have a real good friend who grew up in the Netherlands, still has an apartment there that she inherited. And I noticed and I like detective shows. So I noticed there was a detective show set in the Netherlands called Vandervalk on Masterpiece Theater. So I suggested to my friend that we watch it. Well, what we do, she's in a different time zone. She watches it, I watch it, and then we have a session talking about it. It's been fun because that's her city. She can tell me, what memories it stirred up for her, how she feels her getting it right, showing her city. So it made it a little more, even though I watched a show, she watched a show, we shared it together. So it made it more interactive. So I'm saying be creative with that. I have watched some things and my sister and I have texted during it. We'll plan to watch something and then we'll text as we're watching it, certain things. So think again, how do I just not make it unilateral, but how do I include a connection of mine in my use of media? FaceTime is being used tremendously. Everyone's getting used to it. It's a real easy way to connect with grandkids, friends, whatever. But all the other tools need to be thought about too. My husband was one who, when texting first became popular, he would get mad at my son and say, gosh, can't you just call me? And now he realizes the kid's 21. He texts. That's how he communicates. So if you're going to talk to him, you're going to text him. That's it. So now that's his preferred mode of communication. But don't forget the phone and don't forget email. I've told many of my clients, if you have a sleepless night, email is really your friend. You can, at any time of day or night, use your email, get on there and to your buddies and say, okay, here's that funny cat video I didn't think about sending you last week, but I just want to let you know I'm thinking of you. It can help you. You can communicate to your connections any time of day or night using email. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing email can be fun. You can use it, like I said, send the video that will make them laugh. I send one of my children funny husky videos because she's always talking about getting a husky. So just, and there's plenty of them to share, that's for sure. Other ways to connect with the tools is take online classes together. There's a lot of content now. One thing COVID has done that's positive, we had a lot before COVID, we've got even more. So go ahead and take advantage of it. Libraries offer it. There's a lot of free classes, websites that offer short free classes. Now's the time you can do it online. You want to go ahead and get some brain exercise and play the piano again, try it. It's there, it's out there. So, and finally, two other things that are more snail mail type tools that I want to mention is use real mail. It actually still works. I have never used so much mail as I have until this day and age. But I have found that people really like real mail, like myself, and it's made me very conscious. Of it now. Like I sent my sister and her husband an anniversary card, which I don't normally do, because I saw a fun card that reminded me of them. They just got a boat. There's two little dogs wearing rain slickers, and so it was. She enjoyed it. She said, "Oh, that card was so great." She texted me, of course, but do think of everything you have. Write your grandchild a letter on their birthday and tell them, oh, how proud you are of them and how much you're so happy they're in your world, whatever you want to say. But don't overlook mail. It does actually work. I can say that from personal experience. And I want to end with a final tool that I'm quite enamored of and have recommended to a lot of my clients that's called bullet journaling. And what it is therapists in general, counselors, we like journaling for a reason because it gives us a place to take feelings. We can forgive someone there. We can get traumatic things out in a safe way. But we can also, the bullet journal was created by someone who's an artist in New York who has attention deficit disorder. And his feeling was he has lots of information in lots of places and he feels overwhelmed by it. He wanted his life in one book. So I have included handouts on bullet journaling, and there's a lot of it information on the internet about bullet journaling. But during COVID, you create your own journal. It's quite a process, but you go ahead. It's a combination of a therapeutic tool where you can get things out or just doodle, and it has a productivity piece to it. I like it because it's helped me collect information I didn't do a good job of collecting before. Now I'm a lot more conscious, like I mentioned, of movies and shows I want to watch. So I have one section of my bullet journal is someone will tell me about something interesting. It goes in that section. So you create your own index and then you have it there for when, if you have something overwhelming you want to respond to. I had my brother-in-law die suddenly, age 57, healthy as all get out. And I was grateful for my bullet journal that day because what I used it for is to put my feelings about how sad I was that this happened and how worried I was for my sister. And then I went on and I've carried on. We all do. But thank you again for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today.